So we're going to practice with scientific notation, and we're going to start by using a term called the per capita GDP, or sometimes you'll hear it called the GDP per capita. And this is like the money, it's a measure of the economy and kind of the quality of life in some regards in different countries. So in this first problem here, it says calculate the per capita GDP for the United States, for the United States. It should say the GDP is 19.8 times 10 to the 12th, and the population is 325 times 10 to the 6th people. So to calculate this, I'm going to take 19.8 times 10 to the 12th, and I'm going to write it like that. When we put it in our calculator, we'll see an E. We don't write it with the E, we write it like this, and I'm going to divide by 325 times 10 to the 6th. Now, what I want to show you with the calculator here is how we are going to put this in our calculator. So in our calculator here, I'll move it a little bit there so you can see both, okay? I'm going to put 19.8 and I'm going to do second and then this comma, which gives this capital E. So you can probably see that E. 12, okay? And again, I'll move it closer so you can see that there. And then I'm going to hit divide by, and it was 325 second comma, so that E and then 6. When I do this, I'm going to get basically 60,923. So I'm going to give my answer of 60,923. I'm going to show you a way students often do this instead, is they do 19.8 and then they do times 10, and then they use the caret here, times 10 to the 12th, and then they hit, okay, they do that, and then they hit enter. Oops, can't do that. So 19.8 times 10 caret 12, and they hit enter. Okay. Now, what happens is, you can see how it just put it in scientific notation for me. So I'm going to now divide that by 325, and I'm going to go times 10 caret 6. If I hit enter now, okay, notice the answer I get. I get 609E16, okay? What happened there? What happened is my calculator divided the previous answer by 325 and then multiplied the whole thing by 10 to the 6th. So that E 10 to the 16th, so the answer it gave me was 6.09 E16, which again, I wouldn't write it that way. I'd write it as 6.09 times 10 to the 16th, okay? What does that mean? 10 to the 12th is $1 trillion. So this would be in the realm of how much money per person. It would be, if I move that 4 places, it would be like 60,000 trillion dollars. Well, that's not the same as $60,000. So that's where that is wrong. So again, I'm not going to do that. I'm scribbling that out. And this is why that EE button is so important to learn how to use. All right, I'm going to try this next one. It's going to be 684. So I'm going to write this. 684 times 10 to the 9th over 4.9 times 10 to the 7th. Okay. And again, 684 times 10. So the second EE, 9, divided by 4.9, second EE, 7. And notice there, I get 13,959. So this should be money here, so 13,959. Okay, now it says find the population. So I'm gonna have to rearrange my equation. So population is going to be, if I multiply both sides up here by population, I'm going to get population times per capita GDP equals GDP. And so now to solve for population, I'm going to divide both sides by per capita GDP, per capita GDP. So population is GDP over the per capita GDP. So my GDP is 4.68 times 10 to the 11th, and I'm going to divide by 10,700. So in my calculator, 4.68 second, comma, so second E, and I say EE because that's what the little button says, but then it just displays an E, 11 divided by 10,700. And it tells me the population, if I were to look there, is about 43.7 million. So 43.7 million, okay? You might be like, where did you get that from with this number? Well, if I move the decimal 3 places here and then another 1, 2, 3 places here, that's 10 to the 6th or 6 decimal places, that is million. So that's where I get, and again, you could go to the nearest person, but I'm just rounding off about 43.7 million. I could also write that as 43.7 times 10 to the 6th, or if you want, you could write it like that. Any of those would be totally fine for the people. And if you were to Google, the population of Algeria is probably very close to that. Next, it says find the GDP of Argentina. Okay, so now I'm going to be solving for GDP. So for GDP, I got to rearrange my equation here. To get GDP alone, I multiply both sides by population. So GDP is population times per capita GDP. So my population here, 46,245,000. I could write that in scientific notation, times 19,700. And per capita is really money per person, so people and population and people on the bottom there cancel each other out. Put that in my calculator, 46,245,000 times 19,700. And again, I love this type of calculator too, because I can see like my answers and how my answers come out. And if I type something in wrong. Notice now how I'm going to write the answer. The answer, I'm going to write 9.11. I am not going to write the E. I'm going to write times 10 to the 11th and then population people. Okay. Again, you don't have to know this, but I just wanted to use a slightly different equation, something a little bit different for practice of this. All right. 2 more. So it says here, find the population. So to find the population, you can rearrange your equation, or again, I have from above, population is GDP over the per capita GDP. GDP is 2.3 times 10 to the 13th over 16,400. So 2.3 times 10 to the 13th divided by 16,400. And I get a really big number. So what am I going to do? I'm going to say, okay, this is 3, and then 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's 9. So I'm going to write that is 1.4 times 10 to the 9 people. And again, what is 10 to the 9th? Again, just good to know for life stuff. 10 to the 9th is a billion. So they don't say there's 1.4 times 10 to the 9th people. They say there's 1.4 billion people in China. And again, if you were to Google, you'd see that's about the population of China. So big idea, using our calculator, knowing what these numbers mean, etc. Lastly, number 6. So number 6 here, find the GDP of India. All right, so GDP, my equation for that, GDP is that per capita GDP times the population. So 6,100 times 1.4 times 10 to the 9th, okay, people. And if I multiply that out, 6,100 times 1.4 second EE9, and I get 8.54 times EE12, but I'm going to write 8.54 times 10 to the 12th, and that's going to be the money. If I were to think about that, 10 to the 12th, and so actually I'll just kind of write it up here. Again, 10 to the 6th, just numbers you should kind of have a sense of, is million. 10 to the 9th is a billion. And so a lot of times they move things where they get it to like one of these bases, and 10 to the 12th is a trillion. So when they're talking about spending and budgets in the federal government, 10 to the 12th is a trillion. So we wouldn't say for India that it's 8.54 times 10 to the 12th. They would just say 8.54 trillion dollars. It's a lot of money. So that gives you a sense of scientific notation. Now, let's just do a couple wave problems. So the speed of light is 3 times 10 to the 8th, or again, 10 to the 6th. Sometimes what we'll say is we'll just estimate is 300 times 10 to the 6th meters per second. What does that mean? 300, 10 to the 6th, if we look back at the previous page, is a million. So 300 million meters per second. So again, knowing those words just helps us make more sense of it. So speed is frequency times wavelength. So wavelength is speed over frequency. Speed, 3 times 10 to the 8th meters per second over this frequency, 6.66 times 10 to the 14th hertz. When I divide that out, I'm going to have 3 times 10 to the 8th, again, remembering how I put it in, divide by 6.66 seconds EE, again, using that EE function, 10 to the 14th, and I'm going to get here 4.5 times 10 to the negative 7th, my unit is meters. And this is where we could actually get into like millimeters, or they'll call micrometers. A micrometer is 10 to the negative 6th. We're not going to worry about that. But again, notice what I'm going to do is I'm going to not ignore that negative sign, and I'm going to write that E is times 10, and it's to that negative. So there is negative 7, and make sure I include that there with that negative 7. Wavelength for radar. Wavelength is speed over frequency. Here's the mistake people will make a lot of times is they'll be like 3 times 10 to the 8th meters per second, and they'll be like over 10. Nope, gotta pay attention what giga is. Giga, if I look right up here, is 10 to the 9th. So it's gonna be 10 times 10 to the 9th hertz. So again, I have to use my unit conversions here. I could do it this way, where I could say 10 gigahertz. 1 gigahertz is 10 to the 9th hertz. And then that's where this comes from. So now when I divide this out, I get 3 second EE, or second comma, divide by 10 times 10 to the 9th, and I get 0.03. So my answer here is 0.03 meters. Next one, find the wavelength of TV. That is about 80 megahertz. Got to pay attention for that prefix of megahertz. So wavelength is speed over frequency. So here, the speed is 300 times 10 to the 6th meters per second. Frequency is 80 megahertz. 80 megahertz, I'm going to tell you, is 10 to the 6th hertz. How did I get that? I'll put this right over here. 80 megahertz over 1, just like our conversions before. 1 megahertz. If I look up here, a megahertz is 10 to the 6th hertz. 10 to the 6th hertz. So I get 80 times 10 to the 6th hertz. Or your calculator might do it as 80E9 or 80E7 or 8, I'm sorry. Or it might be 8 times 10 to the 7th hertz. Same thing. So here, I can put that in my calculator. 300 EE8 divided by 80, or if I did 80E6, or if you did 8E7, it would give you the same thing. And I'll show you that in a second. So I get 375. If I do 300E8 and I divide by 8EE7, notice I still get 375. So what this did is it just took that 0 from the 80 and put it into the scientific notation. And I get 375 meters. Last one, the wavelength of EM that is a very low frequency is 4 kilohertz. So wavelength, find the wavelength. 300 times 10 to the 6th meters per second over for a kilohertz. It's going to be times 10 to the third, okay? Again, we've done that one. Here's the other one. You could do that practice on your own, or you could even write it as 4,000 hertz if you would prefer. So now, 300 EE6 divided by 4,000 or 4 EE3, and I get 75,000 meters. Okay, for that one. So, big ideas, using our calculator, scientific notation, using our calculator for scientific notation, how to put scientific notation in your calculator, how to write scientific notation when it comes out of your calculator, and then just even these prefixes here, and we gave you the conversions of giga, mega, and kilo. Again, we've seen kilo before, like kilometers, but mega and giga, with computers we see this more and more, and again in radio waves. And then just even understanding here, 10 to the 6th is million, 10 to the 9th is billion, 10 to the 12th is trillion. So lots of relevance in life beyond physics too with this. I hope this was helpful.